Do you know what is the most dangerous thing that can happen to your faith? It is not always a major sin. It is not always something loud or obvious. It is something so subtle, so quiet, that it slowly disconnects your heart from Allah without you even realizing it. And the most painful part is you can still be praying, still wearing hijab, still doing everything right on the outside, yet inside, something feels empty, something feels distant, something feels heavy. I want you to ask yourself very honestly, when was the last time you felt truly connected to Allah? Not just going through the motions, not just completing your salah because it is an obligation, but truly feeling it, tasting the sweetness of aman, feeling calm and at peace within your heart. Because what I am seeing more and more is not a lack of practice, but a loss of presence. A heart that is constantly distracted, constantly comparing, constantly overwhelmed, until it becomes too exhausted to turn back sincerely to Allah. And this is the hidden problem, the silent destruction of faith. It is not one big moment. It is small moments repeated every single day. The scrolling, the comparison, the unrealistic expectations, the pressure to be perfect, all of it slowly shifts your heart away from its true purpose. And unless we recognize it, unless we pause and reflect, we may wake up one day realizing that the strongest relationship we were meant to have has quietly become the weakest. There is something very subtle happening in our lives today, something that does not announce itself, something that does not come with a warning, something that slowly enters the heart and settles within it without resistance, and that is the quiet distraction of the modern world. It is not something that looks harmful on the surface. In fact, it often appears normal, acceptable, even necessary. You wake up in the morning, you check your phone just for a moment, just to see what you missed, just to feel connected. And before you realize it, your heart has already been pulled into a space that is filled with noise, comparison, opinions, expectations, and endless images that begin to shape the way you see yourself and the way you see your life. And the heart, by its very nature, was not created for this constant noise. The heart was created to find peace in the remembrance of Allah, to find clarity in turning back to Him, to find stability in knowing that everything in this life is temporary and that true success lies in the hereafter. But when the heart is constantly occupied, constantly stimulated, constantly pulled in different directions, it begins to lose that natural inclination. It begins to forget what it was created for. Not in a dramatic way, not in a way that alarms you, but in a slow and steady shift that happens over days, over weeks, over months. You may still be doing everything you are supposed to do. You pray your salah, you fast, you wear your hijab, you attend gatherings, you listen to reminders, and from the outside everything looks fine. But inside there is a quiet struggle. You stand in prayer, but your mind is elsewhere. You make dua, but your heart feels distant. You read Quran, but the words do not penetrate the way they used to. And you begin to wonder why. You begin to feel a sense of guilt, a sense of confusion, because you are doing what is required, yet you are not feeling what you once felt. And this is where the subtlety becomes dangerous, because you start to think that something is wrong with you, when in reality there is something around you that has been slowly affecting you. The constant exposure to images that make you question your worth, the endless comparisons that make you feel like you are falling behind, the pressure to present a perfect version of your life, the need to always be connected, always updated, always engaged. All of these things take small pieces of your attention, small pieces of your energy, small pieces of your heart, until there is very little left for what truly matters. And the heart does not respond well to division. It was not created to be split between so many attachments. It was created to have one central focus, one ultimate love, one true reliance, and that is Allah. But when the heart becomes attached to the approval of people, to the validation of others, to the standards set by a world that is constantly changing, it begins to lose its direction. It begins to seek fulfillment in places that were never meant to fulfill it. You start to measure yourself in ways that are not aligned with your purpose. You start to define your value based on how you look, how you are perceived, how much attention you receive, how closely your life matches what you see around you. And without even realizing it, your priorities begin to shift. What once felt important begins to feel heavy. What once brought you peace begins to feel like a task, and what once was secondary begins to take center stage in your life. And this is how the connection with Allah begins to weaken, not because you have turned away intentionally, not because you have abandoned your faith, but because your heart has become overwhelmed. It has been filled with so much that it no longer has the capacity to feel deeply, to reflect sincerely, to connect meaningfully. It becomes numb, it becomes distracted, it becomes tired. And when the heart is tired, it seeks ease. It looks for quick comfort, for immediate relief, for something that can distract it from its own emptiness. And so it returns to the very things that are contributing to that emptiness, creating a cycle that is difficult to break. You scroll to relax, but you leave feeling more unsettled. You engage to feel connected, but you end up feeling more alone. You consume to feel fulfilled, but you are left feeling even more empty. And all of this happens while you are still holding on to your identity as a believer, while you are still striving to do what is right, while you are still hoping to feel close to Allah. And that is why this struggle is so painful, because it is not visible. It is not something that others can easily see. It is something that you carry within you, something that you try to understand, something that you try to fix, often without knowing where to begin. And the reality is, the heart needs space. It needs moments of stillness. It needs time away from the constant noise. It needs to be reminded of what truly matters. It needs to return to a state of simplicity, where it can focus on its relationship with Allah without distraction, without comparison, without pressure. Because that connection is not built in moments of chaos, it is built in moments of presence. When you stand in prayer and you are fully present, even for a few seconds, that moment has a depth that cannot be replaced by hours of distracted worship. When you make dua with sincerity, even if your words are few, that connection carries a weight that is far greater than long supplications made without focus. When you remember Allah in a quiet moment, when you pause and reflect, when you consciously turn your heart back to Him, those are the moments that rebuild what has been weakened. But to reach those moments, you have to recognize what is taking you away from them. You have to become aware of the subtle influences in your life. You have to ask yourself what is filling your heart, what is occupying your mind, what is shaping your thoughts, what is defining your sense of worth. Because whatever you consistently expose yourself to will inevitably leave an influence on your heart. And this awareness is not about guilt. It is not about blaming yourself. It is about understanding your reality so that you can make conscious choices. It is about protecting your heart in a world that is constantly competing for your attention. It is about setting boundaries that allow you to preserve your connection with Allah. It is about choosing what you engage with and what you step away from, not because everything is harmful, but because not everything is beneficial for your heart. And when you begin to make those choices, even in small ways, you will start to notice a difference. You will start to feel a sense of clarity, a sense of calm, a sense of direction. You will begin to reconnect with your worship in a way that feels more meaningful, more sincere, more fulfilling. And you will realize that the peace you were searching for was never in the noise. It was always in the quiet moments where your heart turns back to Allah with sincerity and presence. There is something very powerful about the small things you do every single day. Things that feel so ordinary, so routine, so insignificant that you barely give them a second thought. You wake up, you go through your day, you make choices moment by moment, and most of these choices do not feel like they are shaping your faith in any major way. They feel neutral, they feel harmless, they feel like they do not really matter in the bigger picture. But the reality is, it is exactly these small, consistent actions that are either slowly strengthening your connection with Allah or quietly weakening it over time. Faith is not built in one moment, and it is not destroyed in one moment. It is shaped gradually through repetition, through patterns, through what you consistently allow into your life and what you consistently neglect. Every time you delay a prayer without urgency, every time you choose distraction over reflection, every time you fill your time with things that do not bring you closer to Allah, something subtle happens within the heart. It does not break immediately, it does not shut down suddenly, but it becomes a little less sensitive, a little less responsive, a little less present. And at the same time, every small act of sincerity, every quiet moment of remembrance, every effort to turn back to Allah, no matter how imperfect, no matter how brief, is building something within you. It is nurturing your heart. It is softening it. It is reminding it of its true purpose. But because these acts are small, because they are not dramatic, because they do not always come with an immediate emotional reward, they are often overlooked, often undervalued, often replaced with things that feel more urgent, more engaging, more satisfying in the moment. And this is where the test lies. Because what feels easy is not always what is beneficial, and what feels small is not always insignificant. The heart responds to consistency more than intensity. You may have moments where you feel deeply connected, moments where your eman feels strong, where your worship feels meaningful. But if those moments are not supported by consistent habits, they begin to fade. And what remains are the patterns that you have built through your daily choices. If your day is filled with constant distraction, with endless scrolling, with conversations that do not elevate you, with content that shifts your focus away from your purpose, then even if you have moments of worship, they will struggle to take root. They will struggle to have a lasting impact because the environment of your heart is not supporting them. It is like planting a seed in soil that is not being cared for, not being protected, not being nourished. The seed may be good, but it cannot grow in the way it was meant to. And over time, this creates a disconnect that is difficult to understand. You begin to feel that your faith is not where it should be, but you cannot point to a single reason. You are not committing major sins. You are not abandoning your obligations. But something feels off. And that is because the issue is not in one big action. It is in the accumulation of small choices that have slowly shifted your heart away from its center. You start to notice that your focus in prayer is weaker, that your motivation to engage in acts of worship is lower, that your heart feels heavier when it comes to things that once felt light. And instead of recognizing the pattern, it is easy to become discouraged, to feel like you are failing, to feel like you are not capable of being consistent. But the truth is, consistency is not about perfection, it is about persistence. It is about showing up even when it feels difficult, even when you do not feel an immediate connection, even when your heart is not fully present, because the heart changes through repetition. It adapts to what you expose it to regularly. If you consistently turn to Allah, even in small ways, even if your presence is not perfect, even if your mind wanders, even if your energy is low, over time your heart begins to respond. It begins to soften, it begins to open, it begins to find comfort in what once felt heavy. But if you consistently turn away, even in subtle ways, even if you do not intend to, even if it feels harmless, over time your heart begins to drift. It begins to lose its sense of direction, its sense of purpose, its sense of connection with Allah. And this is why the small habits matter so much. The few minutes you spend in remembrance, the way you begin your day, the choices you make with your time, the content you consume, the people you surround yourself with, the thoughts you allow to settle in your mind. All of these things are shaping your internal state in ways that you may not immediately see, but that you will eventually feel. And the challenge is that the impact of these habits is not always immediate. You may not feel the effect of a missed opportunity right away. You may not notice the weight of a distraction in the moment. You may not realize how much time has been lost until it has already passed. But over time, these moments accumulate. They build upon each other, creating patterns that define your relationship with Allah. And what is even more important to understand is that change does not require a complete transformation overnight. It does not require you to suddenly become perfect, to eliminate every distraction, to fill every moment with worship. That is not sustainable, and it is not realistic. What it requires is awareness and intention. It requires you to look at your day and identify the small moments where you can choose differently. It requires you to replace one habit with another, to shift your focus in a way that is gradual but consistent. Maybe it is choosing to begin your morning with remembrance instead of reaching for your phone. Maybe it is taking a few moments after prayer to sit in stillness instead of rushing away. Maybe it is limiting the time you spend on things that do not benefit you and replacing it with something that nourishes your heart. These are small changes, but when they are done consistently, they have a profound impact. Because the heart does not need grand gestures to change, it needs steady care. It needs to be reminded regularly of what truly matters. It needs to be protected from what weakens it. It needs to be guided gently back to its purpose, again and again, until that return becomes natural, until that connection becomes strong. And as you begin to make these small changes, you will start to notice a shift, not necessarily in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, steady way. You will find that your worship begins to feel more meaningful, that your connection with Allah begins to feel more real, that your heart begins to feel lighter, more at peace, more anchored. And you will realize that the strength of your faith was never dependent on one big moment. It was always being shaped by the small, consistent choices you were making every single day,